Comic Book Savant, episode 417. Welcome back to the Comic Book Savant podcast. I'm your host, James Harris. This episode, I'm going to be doing another countdown. This countdown episode, we're going to be looking at my favorite artists. We did the last episode where I looked at some of my favorite writers. I thought it was only fair and continuing it on. And I want to do one more episode of Countdown where I look at my favorite creative teams. So it'll be one more episode kind of in this series of favorites that I'll be doing of Countdown coming up. So be on the lookout for that. It probably will be mixed in a few episodes from now. It's about to be the start of the summer movie season, though we're only in March. So we have coming up, we have the Captain Marvel review that's going to be coming up next week, and then I'll try to get the Countdown Creative Teams episode right after that. Then we're going to be building up to Shazam, and oh gosh, what else is coming out after that? Then Avengers. Then we got X-Men. X-Men Dark Phoenix. So it's going to be a ton of movie reviews. If you guys have been around the podcast for a long time, once the summer movie season comes in, I try to review all the big movies and even some of the smaller ones as well. It just seems like each year keeps getting earlier and earlier that movies will be coming out. But I digress. Before I get into the episode, I'd just like to give a shout out to my friends over at the Comics Podcast Network. You can find them over at comicspodcast.com. If you like what I do over here and you're looking for more comic book related podcasts and entertainment to check out, if you go to the Comics Podcast Network, it's a directory, a one-stop shop of literally hundreds of different podcasts for you to check out. Also, if you are a up-and-coming podcaster and you want to see about joining the Comic Podcast Network, it just helps you get some more exposure, and a lot of cross-promotion is done between the different podcasters that are a part of the network. So you can contact the admin through the website at comicspodcast.com to see about joining as well. And they're very free about letting new podcasters into the network to keep growing the network and keeping it fresh. So if that's something that you're interested in doing as well, you can do that. But it's a great resource if you're looking for comic book related podcasts, or you're trying to gain some exposure for you being an up and coming comic podcaster. You can also use it as a resource as well. With all that being said, let's jump into this episode, which is Countdown Favorite Comic Artists. Now, for me, this list is 25. I think for my writers, I had about 26 or 27 writers. I try to pare it down, and I have this kind of better ranked. It's hard because I try to think of, and I did this countdown listing from least to favorite or least to best, or they're all my favorites, but I try to rank them as closely as possible. And I don't know if you guys know this. I mean, some of you guys, it depends on how long you've been with the podcast. I fancied myself an artist for, as a kid, I used to do a lot of drawing. That's what really initially pulled me into comic books, was less the reading of it and more of the artwork is really what captured and fascinated me when I was really young. I pursued art until about, I guess, maybe junior high-ish. I seriously considered art. I won a lot of different local art contests and stuff like that for drawing. I wasn't a full-blown artist. I was just, self-taught, picked up a pencil and I just had a natural talent for drawing. And if you ever go to the website, if you go to comicbooksavant.com, I have a gallery and I have old drawings that I used to do from like some go back as far as high school. Some I did in my early 20s. At one point, I kind of got interested back in art in my early 20s, and I took a few art classes to kind of refine my art skills, and thought about giving it another shot, more so just as a stress relief. Because it was always like a relaxation thing for me to draw and to do art. I was never like an inker. I never could paint and do any of those other more well-rounded artistic skills. I was never a painter on any of that. I just like to draw. And as I got a little older, I start using roller point pens to kind of then ink my work. But you go see a lot of that on the website. Like I said, I have some stuff that I did from, like, most of that stuff that you'll see on the website are recreations of covers that I did or different things like that. But a lot of these artists really like inspired me, and like I said, when I start getting down to like my top picks, but I'm gonna go from my least favorite to my most favorite in this listing. So let me jump into it. And also, if you guys want me to make some reading recommendations, after I do these 3 episodes, let me know if you want me to do companion episodes to all 3, where I recommend like my favorite, like for my favorite artist, like what was that one, book, storyline, trade, or whatever that I could recommend of that artist that really showcases that talent, or what book that I read that made me really fall in love with that one particular writer. And I'll do like a companion where I'll do a recommendation for each one on the list, and give you guys some reading recommendations as well. So let me know if you want to do that. If you're on the Facebook group, I'll start a thread there. Or you can just email me, comicbooksavant@gmail.com, and let me know. I want it to be like a collaborative process. So if you want more, kind of recommendations, like I said, it's a small companion piece to these episodes, I'll do that in between time. I have so much content laid out for you guys, just between all the movies, other stuff that I'm working on, reviews. It's a ton of content that's coming, so but I will fit this in. If you guys want it, I'll do it. But for me, my 25th pick of favorite artist is Mitch Gerads. I was aware of Mitch Gerads by the Punisher run he did with Nathan Edmondson that I reviewed some time ago. Really dug his work. I saw that he did some stuff over at Image with also I think with Nathan Edmondson as well, The Activity, and I've seen his art. He's been working on something else too since then that I've seen. He has like a gritty style that I just kind of gravitate to, that I really like, as far as like more recent artists that have kind of caught my eye, that I really like his work. But those are 2 books off the top of my head. That Punisher was the first thing I saw his artwork on. Then from that, I saw that they collabed on creator-owned work before they even did the Punisher. And then I checked that. I picked some of those trades up as well. Number 24 for me is I never found out if this is a male or a female, but it's I think it's a male. It's Andrea Sorrentino. I have to look that up to see if it's male or female. But I first saw his artwork in the Green Arrow run with him, and they just collected it. This sucks. Now I gotta go look it up. But it was a Green Arrow run with him. Who wrote that? Is it Charles Soule? I don't think it's Charles Soule, is it? Jeff Lemire, that's what it was. Jeff Lemire and Andrea Sorrentino, they did a run And here's one recommendation just off the top of my head. Their Green Arrow run, they just recently collected this in a, I don't know if it's an omnibus, but it's a collection, because it was like a, oh man, their run went for maybe like 20 some issues or something like that, but they collected it in a one bound edition. Finally, I picked up the individual issues, but they just maybe a month or two ago released that in its own collection. Definitely worth picking up. Beautiful artwork, great writing. He's done some other stuff. He's done some Old Man Logan. He's done some work on Secret Empire. Then he did some I, Vampire. So he's my number 24 pick. Next is, I hope I pronounced this correctly, Declan Shively. He did some work on Moon Knight a couple of years ago that just was phenomenal, that I just loved. I just really loved it. He went on to do some other work, but that was the one thing that I saw him work on, and I was like, I just love this guy's art. And I've always loved Moon Knight, and I just always, a good artist doing some sexy Moon Knight art just always has been just like, I don't know, I just think the character design for Moon Knight is like, just, it was like some of those characters like Batman, Moon Knight, Punisher. Something about those character designs that are just stand out so much to me. So when drawn a certain way, just sight and just like on sight alone, I'll pick it up. I can't help myself but to pick it up. And he just did a really good job on that brief run. I think it was him and Warren Ellis, I think, that were doing that, working on that run of Moon Knight. It was a short run. Next for me is going to be Kev Walker. He's done Avengers Undercover and Avengers Arena. He did some Thunderbolts. He's done New Avengers, Marvel Zombies. I really got exposed to his work to Avengers Arena. I really loved that series. The follow-up was Avengers Undercover. I really disliked his art style, dealing with those young heroes and the way he draws. It had a lot of energy. Felt like he had some slight anime influences in his artwork that I just gravitated to, and it fit the subject matter of those books extremely well. And so it's kind of interesting. So the first three artists that I just talked about, styles are very, very similar, where they're more sketchy, loose style, very gritty, grounded approach. And then you go with Kev Walker, which is a more kind of anime and influenced, higher energy, cartoony kind of style. So I like a lot of different. So you'll see a lot of different artists. If you are familiar with any of the writers, not writers, but the artists that I'm talking about, that their styles are going to vary, and they bring different things to the table, that they draw out different characteristics that I like in artwork. And sometimes too, it's the pairing of the of what they're drawing as well, the characters. As well as a good matchup. Next for me is Phil Noto. He did a run on Nathan Edmondson. At the time he was writing Punisher, he was writing Black Widow, and Phil Noto was doing the artwork on it, and it just looked so high class, so like painted, but just so good. It just was a good marriage. I mean, it was the best I've probably seen Black Widow ever look in the comics with Phil Noto's artwork on it. He just smashed that whole series. I think it went like 20 issues. Both series, he wrote them concurrently, and I think it was like less than 25 issues, just short, or maybe at 25 issues. But beautiful Phil Noto artwork throughout that whole series. Next artist for me has to be Charlie Adlard. His run on Walking Dead is number one, phenomenal. He's done over 100 plus issues of that series. He came on after the first 5 issues or whatever. I think Charlie, what's his name? Charlie Moore did the first 5 or 6 issues of The Walking Dead. Then he's came on and he's been the artist ever since. on The Walking Dead, and he's consistent. He does horror well. He's great with storytelling. His style is not the most flashy, and he probably ties in most with Gerard, Sarantino, Shively, even far as style is more that more along those lines. But I like it. I've read literally about 100 plus issues of him on The Walking Dead, and at first his style was one that I didn't like, and that's something else that you'll see on this list. Certain artists, I'll tell you, like at certain points in their career, I did not like their artwork, but as time went on, it changed, and I appreciated it. But then I matured too, and then as you mature, and I went through a phase too, because I'm a little bit older than some of you guys that listen to the podcast. I know we have listeners from all different age ranges that came into comics at different points, and I love that diversity. I'm a kid of the 80s, so I was during the boom of Image and the flashy, Jim Lees and Rob Liefelds and stuff like that. And, that was a fad for a while, and a lot of art was driven that way and influenced a lot. Then as, you get older, you got over that period. And then I started appreciating comics as, I think when I was younger, like I said, the art caught me. Then as I got a little bit older, then I start appreciating the writing more, and then I fell in love with comics, I think, as a whole, as an art form, as I got older, so I could learn to appreciate more. And even through the years of doing the podcast, I've been privileged to go to conventions. I've met, different artists. I've met different writers, and that opened up my eyes a lot even more too on what it takes to produce a comic book. And then it opened my eyes and made me appreciate even more different things about comics and what it takes to put it together, and how much work and effort that it does. So then I began to admire the creators of comics even more through those, personal conversations that I had with certain writers and artists that I had the privilege to meet over the years. So it gave me even more wider view of how I view art, lettering, and I've been fortunate to, I've met Tim Sale, I've met Matt Fraction, I've met Jamal Igle, I've met Laura Martin, and, by meeting these different individuals and having long, short, conversations about the comic, business, it enlightened me like so much. Like I said, that really helped. So like when I view these lists, like that's why I said they're so eclectic in what I like. And through certain things that certain artists I would have never saw, or certain writers I would have never saw, that came through recommendations through you guys over the years. Just like I recommend to you, I love when you guys recommend stuff to me, because it sometimes it takes me down a rabbit hole, because I'll read something from a particular writer or see a particular artist that you might give me something to suggest, and then I go down a rabbit hole, because I always believe, like, if I read something once that I like from a particular creative team or writer or artist, I like his artwork so much, then I want to find more of it, so I will seek it out, and it'll, and that's how I really become a fan of that individual. But I digress. That was kind of a side track thing. But Charlie Adler, like I said, is one of the best working in comics today, just because he's rock solid, consistent. He gets that book out on time. Even like when they do certain events and they gone bi-weekly, and they did one event, I think they went weekly. He's always ahead enough in his work that he can accommodate any shipping that they choose to do on The Walking Dead. And I commend him. He's like the workhorse in comics nowadays, because a lot of artists can't produce the same quality artwork. He don't take panels off. He just grinds that out and do top-notch work. And I love that about him. He's Mr. Consistency for me. Next on my list is Phil Hester. His Irredeemable Ant-Man, his Green Arrow run, Nightwing, just his style. It's a little more throwback and cartoony, but it just fits with the right. Like, I really loved it with Irredeemable Ant-Man because it was infused with a lot of comedic tones. But even with like Green Arrow, because I saw Phil's work first on Green Arrow. He did Green Arrow, and I want to say maybe he did Nightwing, which I didn't know if his style was going to fit for Nightwing, but it worked amazingly well, and it really fit both the story arc that he was doing the artwork on. Then he did Irredeemable Ant-Man, which I felt like out of the books that I really had seen his work on was like the best fit, because he has like a kind of cartoony style to him. It fit the tone perfectly for me. But great artist. Those are the works of his that, like I said, that really drew me into his artwork. Next on the list is Rado Riso, most notably known for 100 Bullets. He collabs a lot with Brian Azzarello. They did 100 Bullets together. They did a Batman run together. They also did the Batman Flashpoint Batman Night of Vengeance limited series as well. Again, he kind of fits in the mold of a Phil Hester, where his style is a little bit more like kind of has an animated, cartoonish quality to it, but he has a grittiness as well. 100 Bullets is a very gritty kind of street crime, a Soprano-ish kind of series, and so he skates that line between grit and a cartoon and a lightness in his artwork. He straddles that line where you can see some very absurd, very disturbing imagery in his books, but it's drawn to a way where it's palatable. You know, it's not so photo accurate or photorealistic, like it's disturbing. You can kind of like chuckle at it if comedy's infused in it, and still read it and enjoy it. And it's not grotesque, and it's not graphic for graphic nature, but it does what it needs to do, and it strikes, like I said, he has a great balance between, I feel like, you know, because you have certain artists that are, you know, as time has gone on more recently, we get more and more, you know, artists that are photorealistic, shy along the lines that want to get more and more, have more and more photorealism in their artwork, and some can do that, and some can't. For certain books, I feel like, or certain stories, it calls for that, and then others it doesn't. So that's why I like so many artists of different and varying backgrounds and styles, because not every story calls for one particular style. You got to match up the right writer and the right artist to tell the right story. And I think the artists that I have on this list balance both sides of that equation, I feel. Next on my list is Oliver Coipel. Most notably, he's done a lot of work at Marvel. Did Thor, the Mighty Thor. He did work on House of M, Siege, The Avengers. He's currently working on the Image book, The Magic Order. He just is... I want to say... When I think of Oliver Coipel, and I think about artists that I've really loved over the years, I feel like he's I love Jim Lee's artwork. He's probably the new incarnation of a Jim Lee style artist. Just thinking off the top of my head, I'm just doing this totally off the top of my head in comparison, thinking about his art style to me. And that is most notably who kind of pings in my head as if I could compare his art to anyone, I would maybe compare him more closely to Jim Lee than anyone else. He does phenomenal work. He doesn't have the body of work that Jim Lee had at this same point in his career, but the quality of his work it stands for itself. He's an impeccable artist, and far as anything that I can remember, he's another artist that you never see him take panels off. He's so serious. He's French-born artist, and I think I first saw his work when JMS did the Thor run, the epic Thor run, and he introduced the world to Oliver Coipel, and he was just like, I really thought he would be more of a star and he would have more stuff out there, more artwork out there than he does at this point. But unfortunately he doesn't, and I think it's a shame. I'm glad that this is with the Magic Order. I picked it up and I didn't even realize till after I opened up the book not open up the book digitally, because I'm reading, digitally, then when I start flipping the pages and we're like, yo, I was like, that's my boy. Like, I hadn't seen his artwork around in a little bit. So, it was really cool to see that he's back out there again, because I think he's such a great artist. Next for me is Joe, I always have problems pronouncing this, everybody does, Joe Madeira, Joe Mads. He had not a brief stint, but he had a few year stint over at Marvel where he worked on a lot of the X books. He worked on Deadpool, Uncanny X-Men, Astonishing X-Men. He came back in a few years back and he did some Avenging Spider-Man. He did some Ultimate stuff. He was a huge thing. Him and some other writers, it was like they broke off to do their own creator-owned thing from Marvel, similar to what McFarlane and Liefeld and all of them did so many years ago. And I think the brand was like Cliffhanger Comics, and he did Battle Chasers, which he's known for. And then that kind of fizzled out because they learned, kind of like the Image guys learned, it's hard being an artist, a writer, and being the business manager of starting your own comic book company, and it kind of dwindled out after a while. He went into video game making for a while, came out of that, came back and did some stuff for Marvel. Then he still, owned the Battle Chasers IP. He a couple of years ago, maybe a year or so ago, he released the Battle Chasers RPG game that he had been working on for a while, that he did a lot of, the artwork and the creative behind it. I would love to see him come back like full-time to comics. He was he was really one of the first in the I want to say in the 90s, because this was like early mid 90s when he really blew up at Marvel, doing a lot of work on X-Men, that he infused that he was very heavily, and he talked about it a lot, he's very heavily influenced by Japanese anime and infusing it in like American superhero comics. He was like one of the main innovator, if I can talk this morning, Jesus, one of the innovators of that particular style in comics. And it was very eye-catching. I mean, to me, because at that point in time, I didn't know much about, I keep saying anime, but Japanese manga. I didn't know much about it. I knew a little about anime. I didn't know much about manga, and until he started talking about his influences, how it influenced him and his art style, that really kind of opened me up and made me start investigating what is all this, Japanese art and cartoons and all that kind of stuff. So he kind of opened me up to a whole different world. But I miss his style because it was very unique onto him, and he did it and he made it work. And I loved, like, back in those days, those X-Men books weren't the best, but I just loved him for his artwork. I just bought a month in and month out just to see his art. I used to love his Rogue, and he used to do some great Deadpool and Magneto and all that kind of stuff. Man, I loved him. I loved him as an artist. I really did. I miss his artwork and wish he would, be back around in the scene, because he killed. For that point in time, he killed until he kind of walked away from it. Next for me after Joe Mads would be Tim Sale, and I had a chance to meet him. He was a great guy, really cool. I didn't think he was going to be as cool as he was. He's done, Batman Haunted Night, Batman A Long Halloween, Batman Dark Victory, Superman for All Seasons, Daredevil Yellow. Him and Jeff Loeb's collabs on those stories are just phenomenal. Hulk Gray, I can go on and on and on and on. Just a great artist. His style is very unique as well. I like artists too with very unique styles. I feel Tim Sale and Eduardo Russo are drawings, like styles are very similar. So like if you like Tim Sale's artwork, you've never read 100 Bullets or seen his work on Batman and different stuff, you definitely they're comparables, I guess is what I'm trying to say. If you've never seen Tim Sale's artwork, just check out any of the stories I just named above. It's just so mesmerizing. I just love it. I love his stories, all of them. His artwork on those stories just stand out to me so much. They're all of them that I've read, and I've read pretty much all their collaborations. I've seeked them out. It's still maybe a couple that I haven't read yet. Some of the newer ones, like I think Captain America White. They did something else, and I missed out on some of their first ones because I think they did one for Challenges of the Unknown that I always had a hard time finding. But some of the most notable ones, like the Batman and Superman and the Marvel, like the Marvels of the Daredevil, the Hulk, the Spider-Man ones, I have all those and have read those, and those are just like A1 classics, just story-wise and art-wise. Do yourself a favor, if you haven't read any of those, just pick up any one of them, try it, and keep going from there, because I will guarantee it will knock your socks off. Next on the list is Salvador Larroca, and I'm going to do these two picks together because I have them side by side for a reason. Salvador Larroca and Carlos Pacheco. I love both of these artists, and their artwork is not exactly the same, but sometimes I could get their styles confused. They both have done great work over the years. Carlos Pacheco, Cable, X-Force, Avengers Forever, one of my favorite Avengers stories of all time. Fantastic Four, Captain America. He's done phenomenal work. That's Carlos Pacheco. Then we have Salvador Larroca. He's done Darth Vader, All New X-Men, Thor, Fear Itself, Avengers, Invincible Iron Man. That run with him and Matt Fraction, it was just phenomenal. I think I have that whole run digitally now, pretty much. I think it took me a while to finish off getting all the issues. I have to finish reading it as well. Super run. I always kind of akin them to, again, not, they're comparables. They're very comparable. Their style is, I'm trying to see how to best describe their style. I can't. You just have to see it to know. If you see one, you've seen the other. It starts where you gotta really get granular. It's been a few times I've been confused by one style over the other, but sometimes that has more to do with who is inking them than their actual line work itself. But that's how nerdy I get. I get down to a line level of, and I don't know. It's not any technical term I'm using. It's just what I see in their line work and different things like that. They both have the thing that stands out to LaRocca and Pacheco to me is that where they have an infusion of a kind of, I'm not going to say anime style, but they blend, those two artists blend photorealism in with comedic / animated style extremely well without it going too far on either side. There's that great balance where they don't go for it straight like photorealism, or it looks like someone who was an artist that would trace a lot and he got busted a lot. Greg Land, where it's very much like it looks too real. I felt like LaRocca and Pacheco always did a great job. It would have hints of realism as far as facial structure, body structure, and things like that. But still, you knew it was comic art. It never broke that line. It stayed in its zone of it. This is comic book art, but it's elevated comic art from what you might see from maybe a Tim Sale. When you immediately look at Tim Sale's artwork or Eduardo Arizo's artwork, you knew you were reading a comic. But then when you start getting to someone like LaRocca and Pacheco, it start blurring that line a little bit more. It's like, am I looking at a photo or am I looking at a comic? I know I'm looking at a comic, but this is not the everyday comic that I'm looking. This artwork is taking this book somewhere else, if you get what I'm saying. And that's what I love about them, and they stand out so much for that flavor they bring in their art. Next for me is Greg Capullo. I don't know what to say. I was exposed to Greg Capullo way back in the day because I was a big Spawn fan. He did some stuff over at Marvel with X-Force, and he's done some independent stuff. Most notably, what really just, I think, skyrocketed Greg Capullo was his run with Scott Snyder on Batman. Just, man, that's some beautiful art. I mean, awesome writing and beautiful art. It's drool worthy, man. I never thought back in the day seeing him do Spawn after McFarlane left that, he would elevate, but his run on Batman, man, he did that. He really did that. I haven't checked out Reborn yet. I've heard good things about it. I need to get a chance to get around to that. And he also did, they came back after they did Reborn. He did Dark Knight's Metal as well, that limited series. So, I love him. He's one of my favorite Batman artists at this point. He solidified that with that long run with Scott Snyder. Next on my list is Stuart Enneman. He's done Action Comics, Final Night, Inferno. He's been around comics for a long time. He did Next Wave, which was really great. Fear Itself. Stewart's artwork is in that category of LaRocca, Pacheco, where it's elevated comic art. You start elevating the game. So, that's where some of these next artists. So we got Stewart, we have Jen Dorisma. She's a phenomenal artist. She's done a lot of Star Wars work in her career. Primarily Star Wars when it was still over at Dark Horse. I would love for Marvel to bring her on and let her do some stuff. I was so disappointed because I think I first saw her artwork on a Darth Maul limited series Dark Horse did way back when the Phantom Menace originally came out. They did these prequel series, and she did the art for a Darth Maul series, and I love her Darth Maul. And they've done subsequent Darth Maul limited series and so forth after, but she's she's like that preeminent. If I want to see a beautiful Darth Maul, she has to be the person to draw it. It's just so sad. She hasn't done more stuff. Then she also did the artwork on the series that her and John Ostrander did, Star Wars Legacy, which I've raved about over the years. That they did over at Dark Horse. That was really, really good, and her artwork is so phenomenal. Again, elevated. These artists are kind of in that same category for me as far as their styles of where I start looking at elevated artwork. And last on that list would be Barry Kitson as well. He did some work on DC with Azrael. He's done some independent stuff, Empire, JLA Year One, Legion of Superheroes. He also falls in that category where the lines, the art lines are a little bit stiffer, more rigid, pushing towards photorealism, but you're still knowing it's comic art. Elevated comic art is the style I would like to call it. Now, the next three artists that I want to talk about are the opposite. One is Scott McDaniels. He did the first, I want to say he did the first 50 or so odd issues of the original Nightwing series that him and Chuck Dixon worked on. And they both left this series around 49 or 50, I think, issue. mark. And he also went on after that, and he did some Batman stuff at Detective Comics. He did Robin, some issues of Robin, also Green Arrow. At the time, he did some stuff over at Marvel before all that with Daredevil as well. A lot of the stuff he collabed with, his DC stuff he collabed with Chuck Dixon on, because he was pretty much writing all the Bat Family books in and around that time. And some writers, newer writers were coming into the fold. Ed Brubaker, he on Detective Comics at that time, after Chuck Dixon left, and Scott McDaniels drew some of their first issues over it when they were breaking in over at DC back in the day. Also, so he has a very energetic, cartoony style to him. He was very good with action and motion. Scott McDaniel, especially with the acrobatics of a Nightwing character, he could do all that very much in his artwork. He had a very loose style, and the one issue I always had with Scott McDaniels is you could always tell when he was behind, because he had a controlled, chaotic style. When he had time, it would come together and his panels were tight. But when he was rushed or he was behind, because he put a lot of detail in his panels as well, so sometimes his artwork could look like a beautiful mess, and sometimes it could just look like a mess. It just would depend. But all in all, I love his style. I loved his style. The next, I will put Mark Bagley, and he kind of falls in that same category. But Mark Bagley's been around comics since I was like a kid. I think I'm talking about in the 80s. I think I first saw some Mark Bagley artwork, like the New Warriors in the mid 80s or something like that, mid-late 80s. Mark Bagley's been around. He's another one, Mr. Consistency. But at times if his artwork is rushed, it can look real sloppy and not as good. But when he has the time and it's put down, he's a very good artist. His Ultimate Spider-Man run, his Thunderbolts run, he's had long runs on books and established a lot of characters for a lot of companies over the years. But he falls in that style. And also John Romita Jr. This is an artist that early in his career, I thought his style was really sloppy, chaotic, messy. And I didn't like him. I didn't like him as an artist. Then Heroes Return. When they brought the Heroes back, they did it was the whole event where they took the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, Iron Man, and the Hulk, and they brought Rob Liefeld back to Marvel, and Jim Lee and all those guys back to Marvel to put these guys in the Pocket Universe for a year and do stuff with them. And then they brought all the characters back. And when they brought Thor back, they had I can't even remember who was writing it now, but John Romita Jr. was doing the artwork, and it was this one particular cover, or it's this beautiful Thor cover with him with Mjolnir and like blasting energy out of Mjolnir, and I just was like, yo, who's that? And I realized it was John Romita Jr. And from that point, I really always appreciated his work. So from there, I followed his Thor work. Then later on, he did some Spider-Man. When JMS was writing Spider-Man, he had a long, pretty decent length run on that. Artwork, it was just some of the best Spider-Man artwork that I'd seen in a while on that book. He went over to DC. He's done some art over at DC. I think he's done some Batman stuff and some other work. But again, I feel like when he's rushed, his artwork can not look as good. But when he has the time, beautiful artist still can produce some of the best artwork you've ever seen. Now my top my top 5 are probably the artists that have influenced me the most, as like when I was a kid coming up wanting to draw or being inspired to draw. First would be Todd McFarlane, just his Spider-Man, seeing him on Amazing Spider-Man initially, because him and the next person on the list, him and Eric Larson, they when they were doing the book in the this was in the 80s also. Yeah, late 80s, I want to say, probably at this point. Late 80s, it was Spider-Man was Amazing Spider-Man was bi-weekly. So 1 week, McFarlane would draw it. the next week Larson would draw it, and they alternated issues, and their styles were so vastly different. But I was fascinated by both art styles. And then Todd McFarlane later on got his own Spider-Man book because he really blew up and became such a popular artist. They gave him his own Spider-Man, this straight up Spider-Man book. Then eventually, he left Marvel and went over to Image and created Spawn, and he's lived off Spawn pretty much ever since then. Great artist. One trick pony, because it was like he did Spider-Man and then he did Spawn, and that was pretty much it. He really hasn't created or done much else. I mean, he's expanded under the world he created for Spawn, which is great, and had a lot of spin-off series and things of that nature, but he never did more characters, which I would have loved to see him do more of. But he was a smart businessman. He, had a cash cow, and he built the business, the empire around it, and then branched out to other things. He's one of the biggest toy manufacturers around, with his Todd McFarlane line, so his toy lines and the licensing deals and stuff that he has. So he focused more on the business and got great artists like Greg Capullo to take over on Spawn, and he kept finding great artists that he ushered in to do those books while he maintained the business. Eric Larson, he went on to do Savage Dragon, which again, I loved Eric Larson's Spider-Man stuff when I was a kid. And I liked the Savage Dragon stuff in the very beginning, but it's like over the years, I became less and less of a fan of Eric Larson's style, but he very much so influenced me when I was younger, and I was really interested in wanting to be a comic artist. He was one of those major influences for me. And the last three, one is going to be Jim Lee. Jim Lee's style just is their styles are somewhat similar, except for John Byrne. So the last three for me is Jim Lee, John Byrne, and Walt Simonson. Walt Simonson was the first artist that I saw his work that it was the energy in which, and the passion in which he drew, and he had very stiff lines, rigid lines to his work, but he had a lot of energy behind it, which I guess what later attracted me to Jim Lee, because it was somewhat similar, a little bit more refined, of course, a little bit more photorealistic, more so than Walt's work, where John Byrne also was a phenomenal artist. Him and Walt Simonson were two of the biggest artists at the time when I was a kid in the early mid 80s in comics at that point in time. And they did a lot of books. They're Fantastic Four for John Byrne. They both worked on Fantastic Four. John Byrne did Alpha Flight, Uncanny X-Men, Superman, Man of Steel, West Coast Avengers, Iron Man, Sensational She-Hulk. John Byrne was everywhere, and he did everything. He had a more smooth, rounded style. Pencils. His pencils were a little bit smoother. He had more rounded edges, not as pointed and sharp as a Jim Lee, a Eric Larson, or a Walt Simonson have in their style. If you look at their lines, they're definitely more sharp and then smooth and then curved. And I use their different styles as a blend of my own, looking at, and I didn't have, I was never formally trained. I was in my 20s before I ever took, I took art at school, but I was always just looked at the comic book image, and I would find a panel or something I would like, and I would, put the comic book in front of me, and I would buy an art pad and pencils and so forth, and just try to replicate it. I didn't know body structure and scale and how to frame it in a picture. I just would look and try to mimic it on the paper, while looking at the image, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't, because I didn't understand the technical aspect and how much skill it really went into producing a comic image. But yeah, these guys, Walt Simonson hands down is like my favorite artist of all time. He influenced me so much. I'm a huge Thor fan. Because of him, his X Factor run, the original X Factor, when they launched that book, that was him and his wife. I think his wife was writing and he was doing the art on it. I love that. I love those books. I grew up on them. That was my bread and butter. I love them for it, So these are my top 25 favorite artists. I try to give some backstory on how they influenced me, why they influenced me the way that they did. That is that list. Like I said, I'll have another countdown where I'll do creative teams. Then, my top creative teams. It'll probably be in a couple of weeks because we got some movie reviews that'll be coming in between now and then. Again, let me know if you want me to do companion episodes where I do full-on recommendations of particular books to check out for all these episodes. I can do that for you guys. You can always just hit me up at comicbooksavant.com. You can or just go to the website, comicbooksavant.com. There's a contact me page. You can email me directly from there, or if you just want to email me directly, it's comicbooksavant@gmail.com. Either one works. You can follow me on social media, Twitter, Instagram at comicbooksavant. It's also the Facebook page, facebook.com/comicbooksavant, and the Facebook group as well. But if you go to the Facebook page, it's a link to I think under community, where it'll show you the link to the Facebook group, and I also have a link in the top navigation on the website. So if you're online and you're looking at comicbooksavant.com, I think I have a link specifically in the navigation for Facebook group. You click on that, it'll take you in, and you can request to join. I'll approve you, and then you can chime in that group as well. Also, if you haven't already, check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/comicbooksavant. Also, consider becoming a Patreon and supporting the show if you can. It is patreon.com/comicbooksavant. All those links are on the website as well. So if you want to check any of that out, you can do so. That's all I have for you guys for this week of Comic Book Savant. I'm your host, James Harris. I'll see you guys again next week for another episode. You guys have a good week, and I will talk to you soon. Take care. Savant and the Facebook group as well. But if you go to the Facebook page, it's a link to I think under community, where it'll show you the link to the Facebook group, and I also have a link in the top navigation on the website. So if you're online and you're looking at comicbooksavant.com, I think I have a link specifically in the navigation for Facebook group. You click on that, it'll take you in, and you can request to join. I'll approve you, and then you can chime in that group as well. Also, if you haven't already, check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/comicbooksavant. Also, consider becoming a Patreon and supporting the show if you can. It is patreon.com/comicbooksavant. All those links are on the website as well. So if you want to check any of that out, you can do so. That's all I have for you guys for this week of Comic Book Savant. I'm your host, James Harris. I'll see you guys again next week for another episode. You guys have a good week, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.